It started with a whisper, a voice so soft it could have been mistaken for the wind if I wasn't listening so closely. But I was, because something felt off. I never imagined that my husband, John, the man I had trusted with everything, was planning to strip me of everything I had worked so hard for. And yet, there it was, his words drifting from the hallway. Just a few more weeks, she doesn't suspect a thing. At that moment, my heart sank. I had to know more. Who was he talking to? What was this about? The man I had married, the one I believed in, was plotting behind my back. His plan was as cold and calculated as the voice on the other end of that phone call. It wasn't about business deals or start-up pitches anymore. It was personal. This wasn't just about leaving our marriage. It was about taking everything I had built, my savings, my career, my peace of mind. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. John was still asleep, his arm thrown across the pillow where I had just been. The apartment was quiet, but my mind was racing. I decided to check our joint bank account, something I rarely did since John had always handled our finances. What I saw made my blood run cold. Thousands of dollars, $600 here, $500 there, $900 in another place, all funneled through our account under vague labels. Consulting fees. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an investment. These withdrawals were deliberate, hidden in plain sight. And then I saw the name CV, Consulting, and I froze, the same name I'd overheard John whispering about Clara Von. Who was Clara Von? And why was John sending money to them? The shock hit me like a wave. I could feel my hands shaking as I gripped the phone. This wasn't just an affair or some bad investment scheme. This was betrayal on a scale I couldn't comprehend. John had been planning this for months, maybe even years. He was trying to drain everything from me, and he thought I wouldn't notice. When he walked into the kitchen acting as if nothing was wrong, I barely managed to mask the fury rising inside me. He poured his coffee and I tried to keep my voice steady. "There are withdrawals here I don't recognize," I said. "And payments to something called CV Consulting." "What is this?" He shrugged it off with a smirk that made my skin crawl. "Just some side investments, babe. Nothing to worry about." But I could tell he was lying. The tension in his jaw betrayed his calm facade. This wasn't just some side project. This was part of something bigger, something more sinister. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing my fear. I wasn't going to fall for it. This was just the beginning. John thought he had outsmarted me, but he underestimated my determination, and soon his carefully crafted plan would unravel piece by piece. But first, I needed answers. I needed to prove that what I suspected wasn't just paranoia, it was the truth. I wasn't about to let John take everything from me. I was ready to fight for what was mine. It was a cold, quiet morning in Seattle, and everything felt off. I had woken up earlier than John, as I often did, but today the usual stillness of our high-rise apartment felt heavier. The sheets beside me were cold, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. John had been up for a while, and though I didn't hear the usual noise of his morning routine, I noticed something odd. He was speaking in hushed tones from the hallway. As I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I strained to hear more. "Just a few more weeks. She doesn't suspect a thing." John's voice was calm. Too calm. He wasn't talking to me, that much was clear. His words sent a chill through me. Who was he talking to? Why was he speaking with such careful caution? The tone in his voice was all wrong. This wasn't a regular phone call. This wasn't about work or his startup. This was personal. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of it. I crept closer to the hallway, trying to listen without making a sound. As I got closer, the words became muffled, but it was clear that John was deep in conversation about something secretive. His voice dropped to a whisper, and I felt the air grow thick with tension. I stood frozen, straining to hear more, but before I could catch another word, John's footsteps echoed in the hall. I quickly backed away and slipped back into bed, my pulse pounding in my ears. He came into the room and the mattress dipped as he slid in beside me, acting as if nothing had happened. His easy exhale told me everything he thought he was in control. But I wasn't fooled. Not anymore. I feigned sleep, my mind racing as I pretended to drift back into unconsciousness. My thoughts were screaming at me, replaying his words over and over. She doesn't suspect a thing. Those words echoed in my head like a ticking bomb, each repetition pounding louder. What was he hiding? Who was he working with? And why did I have this sinking feeling in my stomach like something was terribly wrong? A few minutes later, I turned over, pretending to stretch, and asked in a casual tone, "Where were you?" "Bathroom," he replied smoothly, his voice steady as ever. But I wasn't convinced. A lie in the phone call earlier had already set off a red flag, and now this answer felt hollow. A lie in the phone call. I pressed, trying to maintain the calm exterior. "Just a client had to iron out some details for a pitch," he said, but I could see the slight flicker in his eyes, a momentary crack in his facade. His gaze met mine, unreadable calm, too calm. My stomach churned with the growing realization that something was wrong. I had trusted him with everything, our finances, our home, our future together. And now I was starting to doubt every word he said. The next morning I knew I had to act. I couldn't ignore this feeling anymore. John was still asleep, sprawled out across the bed, his arm flung over my pillow. The Seattle skyline outside was grey and foggy. Typical for that time of year. I didn't want to disturb him, but I couldn't shake the sense of urgency that had taken root in my gut. I quietly grabbed my phone and tiptoed to the kitchen, deciding to check our joint bank account. John always handled the finances, and I trusted him to keep everything fair. But something told me I had to look for myself. When I logged in, my stomach dropped. There it was, an alarming pattern of withdrawals. $600 here, $500 there, $900 at another time, all transferred from our joint account to John's personal one over the past 4 months. The total amount came to more than $15,000. I froze. This wasn't just one mistake or an accidental overcharge. These were deliberate actions hidden in plain sight. I quickly scanned the transactions again, but the details of the withdrawals were vague, labelled as consulting fees. What the hell was going on? We had never discussed these payments, and certainly not at such frequency, but the worst was yet to come. As I kept scrolling, my eyes locked on a recurring payment to CV Consulting. The name hit me like a punch in the gut. Claravon. The same name I had heard John whispering about during that conversation. My heart raced as I made the connection. Claravon. Was this the person John had been speaking to? And why had he been sending so much money to them? I couldn't ignore it any longer. My suspicions had turned into something far worse than I had imagined. My hands shook as I locked my phone, my mind spiraling with questions. Was John having an affair? Was he running a scam behind my back? Was this some elaborate plot to take everything from me? Footsteps echoed behind me, and I quickly slid my phone back into my pocket, just as John walked into the kitchen. He yawned, stretching as he poured coffee into his mug, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Morning, babe," he said, giving me that same charming smile he always did. "You're up early?" he asked, his tone casual. I forced a smile, trying to hide the anger bubbling up inside me. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, crossing my arms as I looked at him. "I was checking our bank account." His hand paused mid-pour. For just a split second, I saw the briefest flicker of something in his eyes. Nervousness, maybe guilt, but it was gone before I could fully register it. "Oh yeah, everything okay?" he asked, trying to brush it off as if it was nothing. I didn't buy it. "There's a lot of withdrawals I don't recognize," I said, my voice steady despite the tension growing inside me. "Thousands and payments to something called CV Consulting." His eyes flickered briefly, but he recovered quickly. "Oh, it's just some side investments, tech stuff, short-term gains. Nothing to worry about." His tone was dismissive, but the tension in his jaw told a different story. I pressed further, CV Consulting. I asked again, needing to know more. He shrugged, sipping his coffee like it was no big deal. "A contractor for the startup paperwork stuff." I knew he was lying. I could see it in his eyes, but I didn't press any further. Not yet. I needed more than a hunch. I needed proof. As John went about his day glued to his phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being played. I knew John well enough to see the changes. His late nights at the office, his sudden interest in streamlining our finances, the new passwords on his phone, the increasing distance between us. Something was wrong. And I wasn't going to let it slide. The pieces were falling into place, and I wasn't going to wait for John to pull the rug out from under me. I would find the truth no matter how far I had to dig, and when I did, I would be ready. The weight of betrayal pressed on my chest, and the anger I felt in the pit of my stomach refused to dissipate. John had crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let him get away with it. What had started as whispers in the shadows, his secret phone calls, his evasive behaviour, and those unexplained withdrawals had morphed into a nightmare I couldn't ignore. He wasn't just planning to leave me, he was planning to take everything I had worked for. My savings, my career, my future. All of it was at risk, and I wasn't going to sit by and let him destroy everything. For weeks, I had been living in a constant state of unease, watching my life unravel while John remained calm and unbothered. But now, after discovering the truth about his deceitful actions, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just stand still and wait for him to take what was mine. I had to take action. I needed to protect myself, my assets, and my peace of mind. The idea of fighting back against John wasn't easy. He had always been the charming, confident one, the one who made all the big decisions, the one who controlled the finances. I had trusted him with everything. But now I know better. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me anymore. I had to take control of my future, and the first step was to secure my financial independence. I reached out to Lily, my best friend and a financial advisor who had helped me set up my freelance business. She knew the ins and outs of managing money, and I trusted her completely. "Lily, I need your help," I said when I called her one evening, my voice shaky but resolute. "John's been taking money from our accounts without my knowledge. I've found evidence of transactions, transfers to his personal accounts, and something called CV consulting. I'm scared he's planning something big. I need to protect my savings, my freelance income, everything." Lily didn't hesitate. She listened intently, understanding the gravity of the situation. "You need to move quickly," she said. "John's been too careless, and it's clear now that he's trying to control everything. The best way to protect your assets is to set up a trust, something that will safeguard your money from any claims he might make. You should also look into putting your savings into a separate account that only you control." I felt a small spark of relief. Lily knew what she was talking about, and the idea of putting a protective barrier between myself and John's reach gave me a sense of empowerment. I wasn't just a passive victim in this scenario. I had a choice. I could fight back. And I would. The next day, Lily set up a meeting with her colleague, Rebecca, a sharp attorney who specialized in asset protection. We met at a cozy cafe downtown, and I felt a wave of nerves wash over me as I entered the building. But Rebecca's presence was immediately reassuring. She was confident, professional, and seemed to understand exactly what I needed after listening to my story. Rebecca was quick to recommend setting up a trust to protect my assets. "A trust will ensure that John has no legal claim over your savings, your freelance income, or any property you own," she explained. "It's a legal arrangement where you can transfer ownership of your assets to a trust with you as the beneficiary. This way, even if John tries to claim anything in a divorce, he won't be able to access it. It's a smart move, especially given the situation you're in." As Rebecca spoke, I felt a surge of hope. Finally, there was a solution to my problem. I wasn't helpless. I could take action, and I was going to protect everything I had worked so hard for. But the process of setting up the trust was more complicated than I had initially thought. Rebecca explained that there were several steps involved, and I had to move quickly. "We'll need to gather all your financial documents, bank statements, property deeds, records of your freelance work, and we'll also need to identify the assets that need to be protected. The trust can be set up in your name, and we'll make sure that it's ironclad so John can't touch it." The idea of transferring everything into a trust felt like a monumental decision. I had worked so hard to build my career, my savings, and my independence, and now I was taking steps to make sure John couldn't destroy it all with one signature. But there was still one thing weighing heavily on my mind: the betrayal. How could I have missed all the signs? How could I have been so blind to John's intentions? Rebecca reassured me, reminding me that I was taking control now and that was all that mattered. This is about protecting your future, Sarah. You're doing the right thing. Don't let guilt or regret cloud your judgment. John has already shown you who he really is. Now it's time to take care of yourself. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words sink in. It wasn't about revenge, it wasn't about punishing John. It was about protecting my future. It was about making sure that no matter what happened, I would be okay. Over the next few days, I worked closely with Rebecca to gather the necessary documents and finalize the trust. The process was tedious, but it was also empowering. I was taking steps to shield myself from John's grasp, and the more I did, the stronger I felt. As we finalized the trust, Rebecca offered one last piece of advice. Once everything is in place, we'll also want to send a clear message to John. He needs to understand that you are no longer under his control. You're securing your financial independence, and it's time for him to face the consequences of his actions. I agreed. It was time to let John know that I wasn't going to let him take everything from me. The trust wasn't just a legal tool. It was a statement of my strength and my resolve. It was a way of saying, I'm not afraid anymore. The day I signed the trust documents was the day I felt a shift within myself. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first discovered John's betrayal. I had gone from being a victim to being a fighter. I had taken control of my destiny, and there was no turning back. In the days that followed, John continued his usual routine, pretending everything was normal. But I could see the cracks in his facade. He thought he was in control, but I had already outsmarted him. My assets were safe. My future was secure, and most importantly, I was free from the man who had tried to take everything from me. Now I could focus on rebuilding my life, not just financially, but emotionally. I had fought for what was rightfully mine, and I had won. John had underestimated me, and it was his downfall. But the battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The moment the divorce papers arrived in my mailbox, I knew John wasn't just leaving me, he was trying to take everything. The envelope, neatly folded, contained a petition that wasn't just about ending our marriage. It was a declaration of war. John wasn't asking for a fair split of our assets. No, he was demanding half of everything: our apartment, the car, my savings, and perhaps, most insidiously, my freelance income which I had built from scratch. He even had the audacity to ask for spousal support. It was a move that left me reeling, but it also made something crystal clear. John wasn't going to just walk away and leave me in peace. He was going to strip me of everything I had worked for. I stared at the papers in disbelief. His arrogance, his sense of entitlement, it was all there laid bare for me to see. But beneath the shock and the anger, I knew I had to remain calm. This wasn't the time to panic. It was the time to prepare for the fight of my life. John thought he could manipulate the system, twist the rules, and walk away with everything he wanted. But he had underestimated me. I had already taken steps to protect myself, and I wasn't going to let him tear my life apart. I immediately called Rebecca, my attorney who had helped me set up the trust to protect my assets. She was sharp, confident, and unflinching in the face of adversity. I had needed someone I could rely on, and Rebecca had proven herself to be exactly that. When I explained the situation to her, she didn't miss a beat. "We've prepared for this," she said, her voice steady, calm. "We've already safeguarded your assets with the trust, and now we need to prepare the legal defense. I'll get the ball rolling on this, and we'll counter his claims with everything we have. John doesn't stand a chance." Her words were a comfort, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. John was a smooth talker, a tech entrepreneur who had built his career on charm, charisma, and persuasive pitches. If anyone could manipulate the system and turn public opinion in his favor, it was him. But I wasn't going to let him use his silver tongue to take what was mine. The battle had just begun, and I was ready to take it head on. Over the next few days, Rebecca and I worked tirelessly to gather the evidence we needed. She advised me to keep detailed records of all communications transactions and interactions with John. Every email, every phone call, every text, everything. We also reviewed the terms of our prenuptial agreement, which John had conveniently ignored when making his demands. We were building a strong case, but I couldn't shake the feeling that John wasn't going to go down without a fight, and he didn't disappoint. As soon as the divorce was filed, John started working behind the scenes to smear my reputation. He made sure that our friends, colleagues, and even some of our shared business contacts knew about the financial issues in our marriage. He whispered rumors about me being irresponsible with money, about my questionable financial decisions, and about my sudden, hidden income. His goal was clear: destroy my credibility before I had a chance to defend myself. He didn't just want the divorce, he wanted to ruin me in every way possible. I felt the sting of betrayal all over again as I heard whispers about me at work. John had taken it a step further, reaching out to mutual friends and even some of my freelance clients, planting seeds of doubt about my integrity. I felt exposed, vulnerable and helpless as the rumors spread like wildfire, but instead of caving to the pressure, I chose to stand tall. I wasn't going to let John's lies define me. I called Rebecca the moment I realized what John was doing. He's trying to destroy my career, I said, my voice trembling with frustration. He's spreading lies, making accusations about my finances, and trying to turn people against me. What can we do? Rebecca didn't flinch. This is exactly what I expected, she said. John is trying to undermine you and create doubt in the minds of the people who are important to you. It's classic manipulation, but we can use this against him. We'll gather evidence of the defamation and counter his claims with hard facts, and we'll do it publicly. He wants to make you look bad. We'll make sure the truth comes out loud and clear. I had never been one to fight publicly, but Rebecca's confidence gave me the strength to stand my ground. We would not allow John to ruin my reputation. We would expose him for the manipulative, deceptive person he truly was. As we prepared for the legal battle ahead, John's attacks became more desperate. He started emailing my clients, claiming that I had been funneling money from our joint account into a secret offshore account. He even went so far as to file a fake report with the IRS accusing me of tax fraud. It was a complete fabrication, a desperate attempt to cover up his own wrongdoing, but I wasn't going to let him get away with it. With Rebecca's guidance, we began building a case of defamation. We contacted every person John had reached out to, asking them to provide statements about his accusations. We also reached out to the IRS to ensure that they were aware of the fake claims he had made. The more we dug, the more John's lies began to unravel. Every false statement he made was exposed for what it was, a desperate attempt to destroy me. But John wasn't done yet. He tried to intimidate me, sending me threatening messages and emails trying to pressure me into signing over more assets. He even went so far as to have one of his friends threaten me in person, telling me that I would regret fighting him. But I wasn't intimidated. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had already lost everything. I thought I knew about John. But I had gained something even more important: my strength, my resolve, and my determination to protect myself. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. Every day felt like a battle, and every piece of evidence felt like a small victory. As the court date approached, I could feel the tension building. John was still fighting tooth and nail to get what he wanted, but I knew the truth was on my side. I wasn't the one in the wrong, and I wasn't going to let him take away my dignity, my career, or my future. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. I stood in front of the judge, my heart pounding in my chest, but my mind was clear. Rebecca stood beside me, confident and composed, ready to take on John and his team. As John's lawyer made their opening statement, I knew this battle wasn't just about money. It was about proving that John had crossed a line, that he had manipulated and lied, and that his actions were not justifiable. When it was my turn, I spoke from the heart. I didn't just present the evidence, though. There was plenty of that. I spoke about my experiences, about the years I had spent building my career, about the trust I had placed in John, and about the pain of discovering the truth. I didn't hold back. I refused to let John get away with what he had done. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. John's claims were dismissed, and his attempt to defame me failed. He had no evidence to support his accusations, and the trust I had set up protected my assets from his reach. John's manipulative tactics had been exposed, and he was forced to pay for his lies. The relief I felt was indescribable. It wasn't just about winning the case. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my future. I had fought for what was mine, and I had won. John had underestimated me, and now he had to live with the consequences of his actions. The legal battle had been long and grueling, but it had also been a powerful lesson in resilience. I learned that I was stronger than I had ever realized, and that even when faced with betrayal and manipulation, I could rise above it. The fight wasn't just for my assets, it was for my freedom, my independence, and my peace of mind. And in the end, it was all worth it. John had underestimated me. In the chaos of his manipulation, he had assumed I would crumble, that I would fall apart when faced with the devastating reality of his betrayal. But instead of giving in, I became more determined, more focused. The battle for my future was far from over, and John's attempt to destroy my financial stability and career had only fueled my resolve to fight back. After the divorce papers were filed, John's tactics became increasingly aggressive. His initial move was to attack me financially. He had already tried to drain my accounts, siphon off funds, and manipulate our shared assets. But when that didn't work, John turned to a more insidious method. The attack on my reputation. His goal wasn't just to get the assets. He wanted to destroy me completely, to make me a pariah in our social and professional circles. He began spreading malicious rumors about me, telling friends, colleagues, and even clients that I was irresponsible with money. He hinted that I had been mismanaging our finances and was secretly hiding income from my freelance business. It wasn't enough that he had tried to take my money. Now he wanted to make sure no one would trust me again. He reached out to mutual acquaintances, spreading stories that I had been dishonest about our financial dealings, that I had been hiding money, and that I was involved in illegal activities. The lies were absurd, but they were also dangerous. These rumors threatened to destroy everything I had worked for: my career, my credibility, my reputation. At first, I was taken aback. I never imagined John would go this far. But soon my shock turned to anger and then to action. I refused to let him get away with it. I knew that if I let these rumors spread unchecked, they would tarnish my career irreparably. I couldn't let John ruin the life I had built, so I began gathering evidence. I knew that the truth would be my weapon, and I wasn't going to let his lies go unchallenged. I started by documenting everything. Every email, every conversation, every piece of correspondence. John had already made the mistake of reaching out to several of my clients, sending them emails with baseless accusations. I kept copies of everything, carefully organizing the emails and messages into a file that would serve as proof of his defamation. As I went through the documents, I realized something crucial. John had been sloppy. He had made false claims, but he had also left a trail of evidence behind him. Evidence that would expose his lies and show his true intentions. But I didn't stop there. I knew that the best way to counter John's smear campaign was to prove that his claims were entirely fabricated. I reached out to the people he had tried to manipulate, clients, colleagues, and mutual friends, and asked them to provide statements about the accusations he had made. I explained the situation, and many of them were more than willing to back me up. Some of them had already heard the rumors, but they hadn't taken them seriously. They were shocked to hear how far John had gone, and they immediately offered their support. With their statements in hand, I had a solid foundation to build my case. But John didn't stop with just rumors. He escalated his attacks by sending false reports to various authorities, including the IRS. He had fabricated documents claiming that I had been hiding income and evading taxes. It was a desperate attempt to cover up his own wrongdoing and shift the blame onto me. But he didn't know that I was already one step ahead. I had been keeping track of all our financial documents, and I had the proof that John was the one who had been siphoning money from our joint accounts. As I gathered more evidence, I consulted with Rebecca, my attorney. She had already helped me set up the trust that protected my assets, and now she was ready to help me fight back against John's smear campaign. "We've got him," Rebecca said after reviewing the documents. "He's made a critical mistake. His accusations are not just false, they are legally actionable. We can take him to court for defamation, and we can prove that he's been forging documents to damage your reputation." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. John had made a serious error by attempting to destroy my career. His lies were transparent, and now I had the means to expose them. Rebecca advised me to file a defamation lawsuit and counter the fake tax fraud claims with concrete evidence of John's financial mismanagement. It was time to turn the tables on him. He thought he could destroy me, but in reality, he was only digging his own grave. Over the next few weeks, we worked diligently to prepare for the legal battle. We subpoenaed John's emails, financial records, and the fabricated documents he had submitted to the IRS. We also gathered witness testimonies from the people who had been approached by John. The more evidence we gathered, the more John's lies began to unravel. It became clear that his actions were not just malicious, they were criminal. One of the most damaging pieces of evidence we uncovered was a series of emails in which John had instructed his contacts to spread the word about my supposed financial mismanagement. These emails were chilling. They were clear instructions to ruin my career, to turn people against me, and to tarnish my reputation. It was an explicit attempt to manipulate and destroy my life. With this evidence, Rebecca and I were ready to take action. We filed the defamation suit and countered John's tax fraud claims with a detailed audit of our finances. The legal proceedings were long and difficult, but every step I took felt like a small victory. As the trial date approached, John became more and more desperate. His lawyers tried to argue that I had been the one who was dishonest, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. His lies had been exposed, and his attempt to destroy me was falling apart. The judge reviewed the documents, listened to the testimonies, and saw the truth for what it was. John had been lying, manipulating, and forging documents to try to take everything from me. When it came time for John to take the stand, I watched him squirm under the pressure. His once confident demeanor had faded, replaced by a nervous twitch in his eye and a shaky voice. He tried to play the victim, claiming that I was the one who had ruined our marriage and our finances. But every time he spoke, his lies were met with hard facts and irrefutable evidence. It was clear to everyone in the courtroom that John had been caught in his web of deceit. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. John's defamation claims were dismissed, and the forged documents he had submitted were ruled inadmissible. Not only had he failed to ruin my reputation, but he was also ordered to pay damages for the harm he had caused. His career, once thriving in the tech industry, had been tarnished by his own actions. The investors he had relied on for his startup pulled out, and his business suffered a significant blow. John's lies had cost him everything. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't experienced in months. John's attempt to destroy me had failed, and the truth had prevailed. My career was intact, my reputation restored, and my financial future secured. I had fought for what was mine, and I had won. Not just in the courtroom, but in life, John's defeat wasn't just about the money or the assets. It was about showing the world that I wouldn't let anyone take away my dignity, my hard work, or my future. He had underestimated me, and now he had to live with the consequences of his actions. His lies had been exposed, and the damage he tried to inflict on my life had only made me stronger. This battle wasn't just about protecting my finances, it was about reclaiming my life. And in the end, I realized that the most important thing I had won was my own self-respect. The courtroom felt like an arena, with each argument, each piece of evidence, a blow in a battle that had been raging for months. But now it was finally coming to an end. John's lies, his manipulations, and his attempts to destroy me had all been laid bare, and the truth stood firm against them. The moment I had been fighting for, the moment I could finally take back my dignity. My financial security and my future was within reach. John had tried to break me. He thought he could control me, ruin my reputation, and take everything I had worked for. His financial maneuvers, his fake claims of tax fraud, his calculated defamation campaign, they were all part of his plan to get away with what he felt he was entitled to. But instead of succumbing to his pressure, I fought back with everything I had. Every step I took, gathering evidence, working with my lawyer Rebecca, reaching out to friends and colleagues for their support, was one more step toward my victory. The judge's ruling echoed in the courtroom like a final exhale of breath after a long and exhausting fight. John had been caught. His fraudulent documents were dismissed. His defamation claims were thrown out. The lies he had spread to damage my career and tarnish my reputation had been exposed as the baseless fabrications they were, and in the end it was John who had to face the consequences of his actions. As the gavel came down, a wave of relief washed over me. I had won. Not just in the legal sense, but in the deeper, more personal sense, John would have to answer for his deceit for the emotional and financial toll he had put me through. He was ordered to pay damages for the harm he had caused, and his attempt to destroy my career had backfired his business, which had once seemed so promising, had been tainted by his own actions. Investors pulled out, and his reputation in the industry crumbled. But for me, the victory was more than just financial compensation. It was about reclaiming the life that John had tried to take from me. I had spent so much time in fear. Fear of losing everything. Fear of being blamed for something I hadn't done. Fear of being seen as weak, but this trial, this victory was proof that I was stronger than I ever realized. It wasn't just about protecting my assets. It was about standing up for my worth, for my integrity, and for my right to live freely without the shadow of John's lies hanging over me. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The fear that had once consumed me, the uncertainty of whether I would come out on top, was gone. I had taken back control of my life. I had fought for my freedom, and I had won. The financial security that I had worked so hard for was now fully protected. The trust. I had set up the evidence I had gathered, the support of my friends and family. Everything had come together to create a shield around me. John could no longer touch what was rightfully mine. The peace of mind I had gained was invaluable, but more than that, I felt a profound sense of freedom. Freedom from John's control, from the fear of his next move, and from the weight of his betrayal. I knew that there would still be challenges ahead. John might continue to fight, he might try to make things difficult for me, but I was no longer afraid. The truth had won. I had proven that I wouldn't be silenced, that I wouldn't let anyone take my dignity or my future away. As I drove home that day, I realized that the real victory wasn't in the courtroom, but in the strength I had discovered within myself. I had taken back my life, and now it was time to move forward. I was free, I was strong, and no one could take that away from me. At its core, this story isn't just about betrayal, it's about reclaiming power, standing firm in the face of adversity, and finding the strength within to rise above life's challenges. Sarah's journey is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In a world where personal and emotional betrayal can feel like an insurmountable obstacle, her ability to fight back and protect what she had built for herself serves as a powerful reminder that we all have the capacity to endure and overcome. Sarah's fight was not just a battle for financial security, it was a fight for her identity, her peace, and her future. John tried to strip her of everything she had worked for, but instead of succumbing to fear, she took control. She didn't just sit back and let the situation unfold. She acted. She gathered evidence, she sought legal advice, and she created a strategy that would protect her from the storm John had tried to unleash. In doing so, she didn't just fight for her assets, she fought for her sense of self-worth and her right to live freely unshackled by someone else's lies. This story teaches us that no matter the difficulty, we have the power to take control of our lives. There will always be obstacles, whether they come in the form of betrayal, personal struggles, or external challenges. But we are not defined by those moments of hardship. Like Sarah, we can choose to stand up to fight for what's rightfully ours and to protect our future. The key message here is empowerment. Don't allow anyone to take away your strength, your dignity, or your dreams. Even in the darkest moments when it feels like the odds are stacked against you, remember that you have the power to turn the tide in your favor. Never give up on yourself. Stand tall. Stay true to who you are and fight for the future you deserve. Sarah's story is proof that no matter how tough the fight may seem, standing up for yourself is always worth it.